Marcus Williams never thought a simple morning jog would change his entire perspective on life. The 28-year-old construction worker had always been a hothead, quick to anger, and even quicker to throw punches when he felt disrespected. Growing up in the rough neighborhoods of Detroit had taught him that strength was respect, and backing down was weakness. On that crisp October morning, Marcus decided to take his usual route through downtown. The city was just waking up with early commuters hurrying to catch buses and coffee shops opening their doors. Marcus enjoyed these quiet moments before the chaos of his workday began. He worked for a construction company that specialized in high-rise buildings, and today they were starting a new project near the government district. As he jogged past the federal courthouse, Marcus noticed an unusual amount of activity. Black SUVs were parked along the street, and men in dark suits spoke quietly into their earpieces. He slowed his pace, curious about what was happening. That's when he saw the barriers being set up and realized some important government official must be visiting. Marcus had never been fond of authority figures. His father had been arrested when he was 12, and since then, he harbored deep resentment toward anyone in uniform. Police officers, security guards, government officials, they all represented the system that had torn his family apart. His mother worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table after his father was imprisoned, and Marcus had to grow up fast, taking care of his younger sister while his mother was rarely home. The memories of those difficult years still burned inside him. He remembered the social workers who treated his family like criminals, the teachers who wrote him off as a troublemaker, and the police officers who seemed to assume he was guilty of something just because of where he lived. These experiences had shaped him into a man who trusted no one in authority and believed that the only way to get respect was to demand it, sometimes with his fists. As Marcus continued his jog, he noticed the crowd growing larger. Local news crews were setting up their cameras, and curious onlookers were gathering behind the barriers. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation, though Marcus couldn't understand why people got so excited about politicians. In his mind, they were all corrupt anyway, living comfortable lives while regular people struggled to make ends meet. His jogging route normally took him straight through this area, but now the barriers blocked his path. A security guard in a crisp uniform stood at the checkpoint, directing pedestrians to walk around the blocked section. The detour would add 15 minutes to Marcus's run, making him late for work. His foreman was already unhappy with his recent tardiness, and another late arrival could cost him his job. Marcus approached the security checkpoint, sweat dripping down his face from his run. The guard was a tall, imposing figure with graying hair and a stern expression. His uniform was immaculate, with polished shoes and perfectly pressed clothes. Everything about him screamed authority and privilege, exactly the type of person Marcus instinctively distrusted. "Excuse me," Marcus called out, still jogging in place. "I need to get through here. This is my regular route." The guard looked up from his clipboard and studied Marcus with cold, professional eyes. "Sorry, sir. This area is temporarily restricted. You'll need to take the detour around 3rd Street. Marcus felt his jaw clench. The guard's tone was polite but dismissive, the kind of voice people in authority used when they didn't consider you worth their time. "Look, I'm already running, late for work. Can't you just let me through quickly? I'll be out of the way in 2 minutes. "I'm afraid that's not possible," the guard replied firmly. "Security protocols are in place and no exceptions can be made." The word, protocols, hit Marcus like a slap in the face. It reminded him of all the times officials had hidden behind their rules and regulations while making his life difficult. Social services protocols that separated him from his father. School protocols that suspended him for fighting bullies. Police protocols that resulted in his friends being arrested for minor infractions. Marcus stepped closer to the barrier, his voice rising slightly. "This is public property. I pay taxes just like everyone else. You can't just block off the entire street because some politician wants to take a stroll." Other people in the crowd began to notice the confrontation. Some pulled out their phones, sensing that something interesting might happen. The guard remained calm and professional, but Marcus could see a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "Sir, I understand your frustration, but I have my orders. The area will be reopened in approximately 1 hour. I ask for your cooperation and patience." Marcus laughed bitterly. Cooperation and patience? That's rich coming from someone who probably makes more in a month than I do in 6. Easy to ask for patience when you're not the one who might lose his job for being late. The guard's expression softened slightly, as if he understood Marcus's frustration on some level. But his voice remained firm. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience, but rules are rules. Now I'm going to have to ask you to move along." That phrase, "rules are rules," was the final straw. Marcus had heard it countless times throughout his life, usually from people in comfortable positions telling him why he couldn't do something or go somewhere. It represented everything he hated about the system: inflexible, uncaring, and designed to keep people like him in their place. Without thinking, Marcus ducked under the barrier. He figured if he moved quickly enough, he could sprint through the restricted area before anyone could stop him. But the guard was faster than he looked. In one smooth motion, the older man stepped forward and placed a firm hand on Marcus's chest, stopping him in his tracks. "Sir, I cannot allow you to proceed," the guard said, his voice still calm, but with an edge of steel. "Please step back behind the barrier." Marcus looked down at the hand on his chest, then up at the guard's face. In that moment, all his years of anger and resentment came flooding back. This man, in his perfect uniform, with his perfect posture and his perfect authority, represented everything Marcus had been fighting against his entire life. The rage that had been building inside him for years finally found its target. The moment the guard's hand touched his chest, something snapped inside Marcus. All the years of feeling powerless, of being pushed around by people in uniforms, of being told what he couldn't do, it all came rushing out in one explosive moment. Without thinking, Marcus pulled back his right arm and threw the hardest punch he had ever thrown in his life. His fist connected with the guard's jaw with a sickening crack that echoed across the quiet morning air. The force of the blow was tremendous. All of Marcus's anger, frustration, and years of built-up rage channeled into that single moment of violence. The guard's head snapped back, and for a split second, time seemed to freeze. Marcus immediately knew he had made a terrible mistake. The guard stumbled backward, his hand instinctively going to his jaw, but he didn't fall. Instead, he steadied himself and looked directly into Marcus's eyes. There was no anger there, no rage or desire for revenge. Instead, Marcus saw something that completely confused him: understanding. The crowd around them gasped and pulled out their phones, recording everything. Marcus could hear whispers and shocked exclamations, but all he could focus on was the guard's face. The man was probably in his 50s with kind eyes and a weathered face that spoke of years of experience. This wasn't some young hothead looking for a fight. This was a professional who had been doing his job and had just been assaulted for it. "Oh, God," Marcus whispered, the reality of what he had just done hitting him like a freight train. "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to. The guard straightened his tie and adjusted his uniform, never taking his eyes off Marcus. When he spoke, his voice was calm and steady, without a trace of anger or malice. "Son, I've been working security for over 20 years. I've been hit before and I'll probably be hit again, but I want you to know something. That punch told me more about your pain than any words could." Marcus stared at him in complete shock. He had expected the guard to call for backup, to have him arrested, to fight back. Anything except this calm, almost compassionate response. Other security personnel were already moving toward them, speaking urgently into their radios, but the guard held up a hand to stop them. "Wait," the guard called out to his colleagues. "Give me a moment here." Marcus's mind was reeling. He looked around at the crowd of people recording him, at the other guards approaching, at the news cameras that were probably catching everything. His life was about to be ruined. He could already see the headlines, the viral videos, the criminal charges. He would lose his job, probably go to jail, and his sister would be ashamed of him. "Why aren't you calling the police?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why aren't you having me arrested?" The guard rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. "Because I recognize that look in your eyes, son. I've seen it before. in my own mirror, many years ago. You're not a bad person. You're just carrying a lot of pain. And sometimes pain makes us do things we regret. Marcus felt his eyes welling up with tears, though he tried to fight them back. No one had ever spoken to him like this before, with such understanding and compassion, especially not after he had just assaulted them. "You don't understand," he said. "I've been angry my whole life. At everyone. At everything. I can't control it anymore." The guard nodded slowly. "I do understand more than you know. My name is Robert Chen, and 30 years ago I was just like you. Angry at the world, quick to throw punches, convinced that everyone in authority was out to get me." Marcus wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "What happened? How did you change?" Robert looked around at the crowd that had gathered, then back at Marcus. "That's a long story, and this probably isn't the best place to tell it. But I will tell you this. The day I learned that my anger was hurting me more than anyone else was the day my life began to change." The other security guards had formed a loose circle around them, clearly confused by their colleague's response to being assaulted. Marcus could hear them whispering among themselves, probably wondering why Robert wasn't following protocol and having him arrested immediately. "I should go to jail for what I just did," Marcus said, his voice heavy with guilt and shame. "I assaulted a federal security officer. That's a serious crime." Robert studied Marcus's face carefully. "Yes, it is a serious crime. And yes, you should face consequences for your actions. But I don't think jail is what you need right now. I think you need help. The kind of help I wish I had received when I was your age." One of the other guards approached them cautiously. "Robert, we need to follow protocol here. This man just assaulted a federal officer. We have to report this." Robert held up his hand again. "Give me 5 more minutes, Johnson, please." Marcus couldn't understand what was happening. In his experience, authority figures always followed the rules, always pursued maximum punishment, always made examples out of people like him. But Robert was different. Despite having just been punched in the face, he seemed more concerned with understanding why it happened than with seeking revenge. "Can I ask you something?" Robert said gently. "What made you so angry? What happened in your life to make you feel like violence was the only way to be heard?" The question caught Marcus off guard. No one had ever asked him that before. Police officers, teachers, social workers, they all focused on what he had done wrong, never why he had done it. For the first time in years, someone was treating him like a human being rather than just another problem to be solved. Marcus found himself talking, the words pouring out of him like water from a broken dam. He told Robert about his father's imprisonment, about his mother working multiple jobs, about taking care of his sister while she was at work. He talked about the teachers who gave up on him, the social workers who treated his family like criminals, and the police officers who seemed to view him as a threat just because of where he lived. As he spoke, Marcus noticed something remarkable happening. Robert wasn't judging him, wasn't making excuses or trying to minimize his pain. He was simply listening, really listening, in a way that no adult ever had before. And in Robert's eyes, Marcus saw recognition, as if the older man truly understood what he was going through. "I've been so angry for so long," Marcus concluded, his voice breaking slightly. "I don't even remember what it feels like not to be angry. And now I've thrown it all away with one stupid punch." Robert shook his head slowly. "You haven't thrown anything away, son. You've just reached a crossroads. Every man reaches this point eventually, the moment when he has to decide who he wants to be going forward." Robert looked around at the gathering crowd and the news cameras, then made a decision that would surprise everyone present. Instead of having Marcus arrested immediately, he asked his colleagues to give them some privacy. The other guards looked confused but stepped back, though they remained close enough to intervene if necessary. "Walk with me," Robert said to Marcus, gesturing toward a quieter area near the courthouse steps. "I want to tell you something that might help you understand why I'm not calling the police right now." Marcus followed, still in shock from Robert's unexpected response. As they walked, he noticed that Robert moved with a slight limp, and there were small scars on his hands that spoke of a difficult past. This wasn't some privileged government official who had lived an easy life. This was a man who had seen real struggle. They sat down on a bench away from the crowd, and Robert began to speak in a quiet, thoughtful voice. 30 years ago, I was working as a bouncer at a club in Chicago. I was angry all the time, just like you. My father had abandoned our family when I was 8, leaving my mother to raise 4 kids on her own. I blamed the world for my problems, and I took that anger out on anyone who crossed me. Marcus listened intently, struck by how similar their stories seemed to be. What changed? He asked. Robert smiled sadly. One night I got into a fight with a customer who I thought was disrespecting me. I hit him so hard that I fractured his skull. He spent 3 weeks in the hospital, and I spent 2 years in prison for assault. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He could easily imagine himself in the same situation, his anger getting the better of him, someone getting seriously hurt, his life spiraling completely out of control. That must have been terrible, he said quietly. It was the worst and best thing that ever happened to me, Robert replied. Worst because I had hurt an innocent man and destroyed my own future. Best because it forced me to confront the anger that was eating me alive from the inside. Marcus frowned. How did prison help you with that? I always heard it just makes people angrier. Robert chuckled softly. You're not wrong. Prison can definitely make people angrier, but I was lucky enough to meet a counselor there named Dr. Martinez. She helped me understand something that changed my entire perspective on life. What was that? She helped me realize that my anger wasn't really about other people or the system, or any of the external things I blamed. It was about pain, specifically the pain of feeling powerless and unheard. Every time I lashed out at someone, I was really just a hurt little boy trying to make someone pay attention to his suffering. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Robert's words resonated with something deep inside him that he had never been able to articulate. But people did treat me unfairly, he protested. The system really was stacked against me. I'm not saying you weren't treated unfairly, Robert said gently. I'm sure you were. The system failed me too in many ways. But I learned that carrying anger about those injustices was like drinking poison and expecting other people to get sick. The only person my anger was really hurting was me. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the activity around the courthouse as preparations continued for whatever VIP was scheduled to arrive. Marcus tried to process what Robert was telling him, but it challenged everything he had believed about himself and his place in the world. So what happened after prison? Marcus asked. I got out with nothing. No job prospects, no money, no place to live. Most employers wouldn't hire an ex-con, especially one with a violent record. I was angry all over again, ready to blame the world for my problems. But Dr. Martinez had given me some tools to work with. Robert paused, lost in memory for a moment. The first thing I did was volunteer at a homeless shelter. Not because I wanted to help people, but because Dr. Martinez had told me that sometimes the best way to heal our own pain is to focus on alleviating someone else's. Marcus was skeptical. How did that help with your anger? At first, it didn't. I was still furious about my situation, still felt like the world owed me something. But working with homeless people taught me something important. Everyone has a story, everyone has pain, and everyone is just trying to get by the best they can. Robert pointed to a man walking past them, dressed in an expensive suit and talking on his phone. See that guy? He looks successful, right? But maybe he grew up poor like us and is working 18-hour days because he's terrified of being broke again. Maybe he's stressed about providing for his family, or dealing with health problems or struggling with depression. Marcus looked at the man differently, trying to see past the surface to the human being underneath. It was a perspective he had never considered before. The idea that everyone, even people in positions of authority or privilege, might be carrying their own burdens. The point is, Robert continued, when I stopped seeing people as enemies and started seeing them as fellow human beings with their own struggles, my anger began to fade. It didn't happen overnight. It took years of work and lots of setbacks. But gradually I learned to respond to conflict with curiosity instead of rage. Marcus shook his head in amazement. But how did you become a federal security guard? Don't they do background checks? Robert laughed. They absolutely do background checks. It took me 15 years of steady work, community service, and staying out of trouble before anyone would consider me for a job like this. And even then I had to convince them that my past mistakes had made me better at understanding and de-escalating conflicts, not worse. The older man's story was inspiring, but Marcus still felt overwhelmed by his own problems. I don't know if I can change like you did. This anger feels like it's part of who I am. Without it, I don't know who I would be. Robert nodded understandingly. I felt the same way. Anger had been my identity for so long that I was afraid if I let it go, I would just disappear. But what I discovered is that underneath all that anger was the person I was meant to be all along. Someone who cared deeply about fairness and justice. Someone who wanted to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. Marcus thought about his sister, about how hard he had worked to shield her from the difficulties of their childhood. Maybe Robert was right. Maybe his anger was just a misguided expression of his desire to protect and care for others. So, what happens now? Marcus asked. I still assaulted a federal officer. Even if you don't press charges, someone probably recorded everything on their phone. My life is still ruined. Robert was quiet for a long moment, considering his response carefully. That depends on what you choose to do next, he said finally. You're at that crossroads I mentioned earlier. You can let this moment define you as a violent person who can't control his temper, or you can let it be the moment when you decided to change your life. Robert stood up from the bench and extended his hand to Marcus. Come with me, he said. There's someone I want you to meet. Marcus hesitated, still confused by this entire surreal experience. Just 20 minutes ago, he had been a man whose biggest problem was being late for work. Now he was sitting on courthouse steps, having assaulted a federal officer who was treating him like a son rather than a criminal. They walked back toward the security checkpoint, where Robert's colleagues were waiting with barely concealed impatience. Marcus could see them whispering among themselves, probably wondering if their colleague had lost his mind. The crowd of onlookers had grown larger, and Marcus noticed several people still recording with their phones. Johnson, Robert called to one of the other guards. I need to make a phone call. Can you cover my position for a few minutes? Johnson, a younger man with a skeptical expression, shook his head. Robert, what are you doing? This guy just hit you, and you're acting like he's your long-lost nephew. We have protocols to follow. I understand your concern, Robert replied calmly. But I'm asking for a personal favor here. Give me 15 minutes to handle this my way, and then we'll follow whatever protocol you think is appropriate. Marcus watched this exchange with growing anxiety. He was beginning to realize that Robert's compassionate response might be putting the older man's career at risk. Maybe I should just turn myself in, Marcus said quietly. I don't want to cause problems for you. Robert turned to him with a slight smile. Son, I've been causing problems for authority figures since before you were born. A few more minutes won't hurt my reputation any. He pulled out his cell phone and dialed a number from memory. Marcus could only hear one side of the conversation, but it quickly became clear that Robert was calling in a significant favor. Dr. Martinez. It's Robert Chen. I know it's been a while, but I need your help with something. Yes, I'm still working. Security? No, this isn't about me. I have a young man here who reminds me a lot of myself 30 years ago, and I think he could benefit from talking to you. There was a long pause as Robert listened to the response. Marcus could hear a woman's voice on the other end, though he couldn't make out the words. I understand it's short notice, but this is important. He's at a crossroads, and I think you might be the only person who can help him see what I see. Yes, I'll bring him by this afternoon if he's willing. Robert ended the call and looked at Marcus seriously. Dr. Martinez still practices therapy here in the city. She's agreed to see you today, no charge if you're interested in talking to someone who understands what you're going through. Marcus was stunned. Why would you do this for me? I just hit you in the face. Most people would want to see me punished, not helped. Because 30 years ago someone did the same thing for me, Robert replied. The police officer who arrested me could have thrown the book at me, made sure I got the maximum sentence. Instead, he visited me in jail and helped me understand that I had a choice to make about my future. The older guard, Johnson, approached them again, this time looking more concerned than annoyed. Robert, I've been watching this whole situation, and I have to admit I'm curious. What exactly are you trying to accomplish here? Robert looked at his colleague thoughtfully. Johnson, how long have you known me? About 5 years, I guess. You've always been one of the most professional guards I've worked with. And in those 5 years, have I ever made a decision that put security at risk or caused problems for the team? Johnson shook his head reluctantly. No, you haven't. But this is different, Robert. This man assaulted you. There are witnesses, probably video footage. If we don't report this properly, it could come back on all of us. Marcus watched this conversation with growing guilt. Robert was risking his reputation and possibly his job to help someone who had attacked him. The weight of that kindness was almost overwhelming. You're absolutely right, Robert said to Johnson, and we will report this properly, but I want to give Marcus here a chance to make this right before we do. He turned back to Marcus. Here's what I'm proposing. You come with me to see Dr. Martinez this afternoon. We have a real conversation about what led to this moment and what you want to do differently going forward. Then tomorrow morning you come back here and we file a formal report about what happened. Marcus frowned. But won't I be arrested then? Maybe, Robert said honestly. That will depend on several factors. Whether you show genuine remorse, whether you're committed to getting help, whether the prosecutor thinks jail time will actually help you or just make things worse. Johnson looked skeptical. Robert, you can't guarantee this guy will show up tomorrow. What if he just disappears? Then he'll be a fugitive from justice, and his life will be even worse than it is now, Robert replied. But I don't think that's going to happen. Marcus felt the weight of everyone's eyes on him. The crowd was still watching, though most had probably moved on with their day. He knew that somewhere online, videos of him punching a security guard were probably already being shared and commented on. His moment of rage had become public, and there was no taking it back. What if I can't change? Marcus asked quietly. What if I'm just too angry, too messed up to be any different? Robert placed a gentle hand on Marcus's shoulder. The fact that you're asking that question tells me you can change. People who can't change don't worry about whether they can. They just keep making the same mistakes over and over. Marcus looked around at the scene, the courthouse, the security barriers, the other guards watching him with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. An hour ago, this had all seemed like enemy territory, a symbol of everything that was keeping him down. Now he was beginning to see it differently. If I do this, if I go see this doctor and try to get help, what happens to my job? My boss is probably already wondering where I am. Robert pulled out his phone again. What's your supervisor's name? I'll call and explain that you were delayed due to a security situation and that you'll be in tomorrow. Marcus stared at him, in amazement. You would do that? Son, I told you, I've been where you are. I know what it's like to feel like the whole world is against you. The truth is, most people want to help if you give them a chance. Johnson stepped forward, his expression having shifted from skepticism to something closer to respect. Robert, I have to ask, why are you so sure about this guy? What if you're wrong and he really is just a violent person who can't be helped? Robert was quiet for a moment, studying Marcus's face. Because I recognized something in his eyes that I saw in my own mirror years ago. He's not violent because he enjoys hurting people. He's violent because he's in pain and doesn't know any other way to express it. Marcus felt tears welling up in his eyes again. No one had ever understood him so clearly, so completely. For the first time in years, he felt like someone was seeing him as a whole person rather than just his worst moments. Okay, he said quietly. I'll go see Dr. Martinez, and I'll come back tomorrow to face whatever consequences I have to face. Robert smiled and extended his hand. Then let's go change your life. Dr. Elena Martinez's office was nothing like what Marcus had expected. Instead of the sterile, intimidating environment he had imagined, the space felt warm and welcoming. Soft lighting filtered through gauze curtains, and the walls were covered with artwork that seemed to celebrate human resilience rather than clinical achievement. Comfortable chairs were arranged around a small coffee table, rather than the traditional therapist's couch he had seen in movies. Dr. Martinez herself was a small woman in her 60s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a simple bun. She greeted Robert with a warm hug, and when she turned to Marcus, he saw none of the judgment or suspicion he had grown accustomed to from authority figures. "Marcus," she said simply, extending her hand. "Robert told me a little about what happened this morning. I'm glad you decided to come." Marcus shook her hand nervously. "To be honest, I'm not sure why I'm here. I've never talked to a therapist before, and I don't really know what to expect." Dr. Martinez smiled. "That's perfectly normal. Most people don't know what to expect from therapy, especially their first time. But I can tell you what won't happen. I won't judge you, I won't try to fix you, and I won't pretend to have all the answers." Robert settled into one of the chairs and Marcus followed suit, though he remained tense and ready to leave at any moment. Dr. Martinez poured 3 cups of tea from a pot on her desk and handed them around before taking her own. "C8. Robert tells me you remind him of himself at your age," she began. "He also mentioned that you're dealing with a lot of anger. Can you tell me about that?" Marcus looked at Robert, who nodded encouragingly. "I don't know where to start. I've been angry for as long as I can remember. At my father for leaving, at my mother for always being gone, at teachers who didn't care, at police who treated me like a criminal before I'd done anything wrong." "That sounds exhausting," Dr. Martinez observed gently. "Carrying that much anger for that long must be incredibly draining." The simple acknowledgement of his pain caught Marcus off guard. He had expected her to challenge his anger, to tell him he was wrong to feel the way he did. Instead, she seemed to understand that his anger, while destructive, was also a natural response to real trauma. "It is exhausting," he admitted. "Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning in it, like it's the only thing that defines me anymore." Dr. Martinez nodded thoughtfully. "Anger is often called a secondary emotion, Marcus. What that means is that it usually comes after other feelings: hurt, fear, sadness, disappointment. Can you think of what might be underneath your anger?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, trying to access emotions he had buried under years of rage. I guess I feel abandoned. Like everyone who was supposed to take care of me just left or let me down. That's a very painful feeling," Dr. Martinez said softly. "No wonder you developed anger to protect yourself from it. Anger can feel more powerful than hurt. It makes us feel like we have some control when everything else feels chaotic." Robert leaned forward in his chair. "That's exactly what I learned here, Marcus. My anger wasn't really about other people. It was about feeling powerless and scared." Marcus looked at the older man with new understanding. "Is that why you didn't arrest me this morning? Because you recognize that feeling?" "Partly," Robert replied, "but also because I learned something else in this office, that people can change, even when it seems impossible. Dr. Martinez helped me understand that my past didn't have to determine my future." Dr. Martinez turned back to Marcus. "Tell me about this morning. What was going through your mind in the moments before you hit Robert?" Marcus took a sip of his tea, trying to organize his thoughts. "I was already frustrated because I was going to be late for work. Then Robert blocked my path and started talking about protocols and rules. All I could think about was how people in authority always have their rules that make life harder for people like me." "People like you?" Dr. Martinez asked gently. "Poor people, working class people, people without connections or power. It feels like the whole system is designed to keep us in our place." Dr. Martinez nodded. "I can understand why you might feel that way, especially given your experiences. But I'm curious, in that moment when you hit Robert, did you see him as an individual person, or did you see him as a symbol of that system?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. He realized that he hadn't seen Robert as a person at all, just as another uniformed official standing in his way. "I didn't see him as a person," he admitted quietly. "I just saw the uniform and the authority and all the times I'd been pushed around before." "That's very honest of you," Dr. Martinez said. "And it's also very human. When we're in pain, We sometimes stop seeing other people clearly. They become symbols of our hurt rather than individuals with their own stories and struggles. Robert shifted in his chair. Can I share something, Marcus? About what I was thinking this morning when you hit me? Marcus nodded, curious despite himself. My first thought wasn't anger or fear. It was recognition. I saw the same look in your eyes that I used to see in my own mirror. You looked like a man who was drowning and striking out at anyone who came too close. Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. That's exactly how I feel most of the time, like I'm drowning and no one understands or cares. Dr. Martinez leaned forward slightly. Marcus, what would it feel like to not carry that anger anymore? Not to have it consuming your energy and shaping every interaction you have? Marcus tried to imagine it, but the concept seemed foreign to him. I honestly don't know. The anger has been with me for so long that I can't remember what life was like without it. What if I let it go, and there's nothing left of me? That's a very common fear, Dr. Martinez assured him. Many people worry that their anger is the only thing that makes them strong or interesting. But what I've learned in 30 years of practice is that underneath anger, there's usually something much more powerful. Compassion. Marcus frowned. I don't understand. How can anger and compassion be connected? Robert spoke up. Think about why you got so angry this morning, Marcus. Wasn't it because you cared deeply about fairness, about being treated with respect? Those are compassionate values. You just expressed them in a destructive way. Dr. Martinez nodded approvingly at Robert's insight. Exactly. Marcus, your anger tells me that you have a strong sense of justice, that you care when people are treated poorly. Those are wonderful qualities. The question is how to channel those feelings in a way that actually creates positive change rather than more conflict. Marcus considered this perspective. He had never thought of his anger as being rooted in compassion, but there was truth to what they were saying. His rage often came from witnessing or experiencing unfairness. He did care deeply about people being treated with dignity. So how do I change? Marcus asked. How do I stop being angry all the time? Dr. Martinez smiled. The same way Robert did, one day at a time, with a lot of patience and support. The first step is understanding that change is possible. The second step is being willing to do the work, even when it's uncomfortable. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a small notebook which she handed to Marcus. I want you to try something for the next week. Every time you feel anger rising up, I want you to stop and ask yourself 3 questions. What am I really feeling underneath this anger? What do I need right now? And how can I express that need in a way that's more likely to get me what I want? Marcus took the notebook, feeling skeptical. You really think writing in a journal is going to fix years of anger problems? Not by itself, Dr. Martinez admitted, but it's a start. The goal isn't to eliminate anger completely. Anger can be a healthy emotion when it motivates us to address real problems. The goal is to respond to anger thoughtfully, rather than reactively. Robert stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. Marcus, can I tell you what my life looks like now? I wake up every morning excited to go to work. I have friends who respect me, colleagues who trust my judgment. I'm married to a wonderful woman who loves me, and we're raising 2 teenagers who actually talk to me about their problems. He turned back to face Marcus. None of that would have been possible if I had continued down the path I was on 30 years ago. The anger was destroying everything good in my life, and I didn't even realize it. Marcus tried to imagine having the kind of life Robert described: meaningful work, loving relationships, respect from others. It seemed almost impossibly far from where he was now. But what if I try to change and I can't? What if I'm just too damaged? Dr. Martinez's voice was firm, but kind. Marcus, you're here, aren't you? You came to see me instead of running away or making excuses. You're asking hard questions about yourself and genuinely considering the possibility that things could be different. Those are not the actions of someone who's too damaged to change. The 3 of them sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of the conversation settling around them. Marcus found himself thinking about his sister, about the kind of brother he wanted to be for her. He thought about the construction workers he supervised, about being the kind of leader who inspired people rather than intimidating them. "There's something else I want you to consider," Dr. Martinez said eventually. "Robert mentioned that you have a younger sister you've been taken." The next morning, Marcus stood outside the federal courthouse at exactly 8 o'clock, wearing his best shirt and carrying the notebook Dr. Martinez had given him. He had barely slept the night before, his mind racing between anxiety about what would happen and a strange sense of hope he hadn't felt in years. Robert was waiting for him at the same security checkpoint where everything had begun 24 hours earlier. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Robert admitted as Marcus approached. "I gave you my word," Marcus replied. "Besides, I've been running away from my problems my whole life. It's time to face them." Johnson, the other security guard from yesterday, joined them as they walked toward the courthouse entrance. Marcus noticed that his expression was different today, less suspicious, more curious. "Robert filled me in on what happened after you left yesterday," Johnson said. "I have to admit, I'm impressed that you came back." Marcus felt a flutter of pride at the unexpected compliment. "Dr. Martinez helped me understand some things about myself. I still have a long way to go, but at least now I know which direction I want to head." They entered the courthouse together, and Robert led them to a small office on the second floor. The nameplate on the door read, "District Attorney Sarah Kim." Marcus's stomach clenched with nervousness. He had never spoken to a prosecutor before, and his only knowledge of them came from television shows and movies, where they seemed determined to send everyone to prison. District Attorney Kim was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She looked up from her paperwork as they entered, and Marcus could feel her studying him carefully. "Mr. Williams," she said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. "Officer Chen has told me quite a story about you." Marcus sat down, his hands trembling slightly. "Ma'am, I want to start by saying how sorry I am for what I did yesterday. There's no excuse for hitting Officer Chen, and I take full responsibility for my actions." District Attorney Kim leaned back in her chair, seeming surprised by his directness. "That's refreshing, Mr. Williams. Most people who sit in that chair spend their time making excuses or blaming other people for their problems." "I spent my whole life doing that," Marcus replied honestly. "It never solved anything, it just made me angrier." Robert stepped forward. "Sarah, I know this is unusual, but I'd like to request that we handle this case differently than we normally would." The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. "Differently how, Robert?" "The man assaulted a federal officer in front of dozens of witnesses. There are probably videos of it on social media by now." "I'm not asking you to ignore what happened," Robert clarified. "I'm asking you to consider what might actually help Marcus become a productive member of society versus what might just satisfy our desire for punishment." District Attorney Kim turned back to Marcus. "Tell me about your conversation with Dr. Martinez yesterday. What did you learn?" Marcus took a deep breath, trying to organize his thoughts. "I learned that my anger isn't really about other people. It's about pain and fear that I've been carrying around for years. I learned that I've been seeing people as enemies instead of human beings with their own struggles. And I learned that I have a choice about who I want to be going forward." "Those are good insights," the prosecutor acknowledged. "But insights alone don't undo the damage you've caused. Officer Chen could have been seriously injured. What you did was a federal crime, and there have to be consequences." Marcus nodded. "I understand that, and I'm prepared to accept whatever consequences you think are appropriate. But I want you to know that I'm committed to making sure something like this never happens again." District Attorney Kim was quiet for a long moment, tapping her pen against her desk as she considered her options. "Mr. Williams, I've been a prosecutor for 15 years. I've seen thousands of cases involving assault, domestic violence, and other crimes driven by anger. Most of the time, traditional punishment, jail time, fines, probation, doesn't actually prevent people from reoffending." Marcus felt a glimmer of hope. What would prevent reoffending? "Genuine change," she replied. "The kind of deep personal work that addresses the root causes of violent behavior. Officer Chen seems to believe you're capable of that kind of change. Dr. Martinez apparently agrees. The question is whether you're willing to do whatever it takes to prove them right." "Robert, leaned forward in his chair. "Sarah, what if we proposed a restorative justice approach? Marcus could plead guilty to the charges, but instead of jail time, he could commit to an intensive anger management and therapy program. He could also do community service and make a public apology." The prosecutor looked skeptical. "And what happens if he doesn't follow through? What happens if he gets angry and hits someone else in 6 months?" Marcus spoke up before Robert could answer. "Then I'll turn myself in and serve whatever sentence you think I deserve. But I won't let that happen. I have too much to lose now." "What do you mean?" District Attorney Kim asked. "Yesterday I was just an angry guy with nothing to lose. Today I have people who believe in me, people who are willing to help me become better. I have a sister who needs me to be a good example. I have a chance to build a life I can actually be proud of." Marcus pulled out the notebook Dr. Martinez had given him and showed it to the prosecutor. "I've already started writing in this. Every time I felt anger yesterday, I stopped and asked myself the questions Dr. Martinez taught me. It's hard work, but it's working." District Attorney Kim examined the notebook, reading a few of Marcus's entries. He had written about feeling frustrated in traffic, about getting annoyed with a slow cashier at the grocery store, about his instinctive anger when his sister's teacher called to discuss her grades. In each case, he had worked through the exercise Dr. Martinez had taught him, identifying the underlying emotions and finding more constructive ways to respond. "This is impressive, Mr. Williams," she said finally. "But it's only been 1 day. How do I know you'll stick with this when the work gets harder?" Marcus thought about the question seriously. "You don't know, and I can't prove it with words. But I can tell you that yesterday was the first day in years that I went to bed feeling hopeful instead of angry. I can tell you that I want to be the kind of man my sister can look up to, and the kind of man who deserves the faith Officer Chen and Dr. Martinez have shown me." The prosecutor set down the notebook and looked at all 3 men. "Here's what I'm willing to offer, Mr. Williams. You'll plead guilty to assault on a federal officer. You'll complete a 6-month intensive anger management program with Dr. Martinez. You'll perform 200 hours of community service, preferably working with at-risk youth who might benefit from hearing your story. And you'll write a formal letter of apology that we'll share with the media to counter any negative publicity from yesterday's incident." Marcus felt his heart racing. It was more generous than anything he had dared to hope for. "And if I complete all of that successfully, then we'll recommend that the charges be reduced to a misdemeanor, and you'll receive probation instead of jail time. But Mr. Williams," her voice became stern, "if you violate any part of this agreement, if you miss appointments or fail to complete your community service or get arrested for anything else, you'll serve the full sentence for felony assault of a federal officer. Do you understand?" Marcus stood up and extended his hand to the prosecutor. "I understand, and I accept your offer. Thank you for giving me this chance." As they left the courthouse an hour later, Marcus felt like he was walking into a completely different world than the one he had known the day before. The same buildings surrounded him. The same people walked past him on the sidewalk. But everything looked different through his new perspective. "Robert," he said as they paused on the courthouse steps, "I need to ask you something. Why did you take such a big risk on me? Your colleagues think you're crazy, the prosecutor was skeptical, and you barely know me. Why stick your neck out for someone who hit you?" Robert smiled and looked out at the busy street in front of them. "Because 30 years ago, a police officer named Jim Rodriguez took the same risk on me. He didn't have to visit me in jail, didn't have to help me find Dr. Martinez, didn't have to write letters of recommendation when I applied for jobs. But he did, and it changed my life." "What happened to him?" Marcus asked. "He retired a few years ago. Lives in Florida now with his wife. But we still talk every Christmas, and I still send him updates about the people I've been able to help over the years." Robert paused and looked directly at Marcus. "Someday, Marcus, you're going to meet someone who reminds you of yourself at this moment, someone who's angry and lost and convinced that the world is against them, and you're going to have a choice about whether to write them off or give them the same chance I'm giving you." Marcus nodded, understanding the weight of that responsibility. "I won't let you down, Robert. I promise." As they walked back toward the security checkpoint where Marcus's new life had begun, Robert clapped him on the shoulder. "Son, You've already kept the most important promise, the one you made to yourself to change. Everything else is just details. 6 months later, Marcus Williams stood in front of a group of teenagers at a community center, telling them about the morning he hit a royal guard with full force and how the guard's response had changed his entire life. In the BA,